The sterile scent of antiseptic and old coffee clung to Dr. Eris Thorne like a second skin, a familiar comfort in the stark, unforgiving halls of St. Jude's. At 48, her dreadlocks, meticulously maintained and often braided with intricate patterns, were a testament to her heritage and her personal defiance against the rigid, often unspoken conformity of the medical establishment. Today, however, they felt like a target. It was 7 o'clock, and the morning briefing for the Surgical Intensive Care Unit, SICU, was already underway, a cacophony of beeping monitors and hushed, urgent voices. Dr. Thorne, a visiting specialist filling in for a sudden vacancy, stood slightly apart, her dark eyes scanning the vitals projected onto the screen, a quiet observer amidst the bustling residents and attendings. She wore her scrubs with an almost military precision, a habit ingrained from years of high-stakes trauma work, a discipline that belied the dismissive glances she was receiving. "And who is this, Dr. Albright?" A sharp, reedy voice cut through the drone of medical jargon. Dr. Albright, the unit's chief of surgery, a man whose silver hair and crisp white coat exuded an air of unearned authority, gestured vaguely towards Dr. Thorne. His tone, laced with a barely concealed sneer, drew the attention of several younger residents, their faces mirroring a blend of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. Dr. Thorne felt the familiar prickle of irritation, a sensation she had learned to compartmentalize over 2 decades of navigating similar microaggressions. Her credentials, a formidable list of fellowships and board certifications in critical care and cardiothoracic surgery, were a silent rebuke to such dismissiveness, yet they rarely seemed to precede her. "This is Dr. Thorne, sir." "She's filling in," Albright stammered, his gaze flicking to Thorne's hair, a slight wrinkle of distaste marring his otherwise placid features. A snicker rippled through a group of residents, their eyes lingering on her dreadlocks, some exchanging knowing glances. "A temporary arrangement," Albright added, as if to reassure himself and his team that this anomaly was fleeting. Thorne's jaw tightened. She had seen this play out countless times, the assumption of incompetence based on appearance, the casual disrespect veiled as professional inquiry. She had learned to channel her anger, to convert it into an almost hyper-focused intensity that made her a formidable presence in any operating theater or critical care setting. "Dr. Thorne," she corrected, her voice low but firm, cutting through the residual snickering. "Eris Thorne, board-certified in critical care and cardiothoracic surgery. I'm here to ensure patient continuity during Dr. Peterson's leave." She offered no further explanation, no apology for her presence or her appearance. Her gaze, direct and unwavering, met Albright's, a silent challenge. The chief of surgery, momentarily taken aback by her forthrightness, merely grunted and turned back to the screen, clearly dismissing her as an irrelevant, if momentarily inconvenient, detail. The briefing continued, a blur of patient histories, medication adjustments, and surgical plans, all delivered with an air of practiced indifference. Thorne listened, absorbing every detail, her mind already mapping out potential complications, anticipating the subtle shifts in patient physiology that others might miss. She was an architect of survival, and this unit, despite its superficial disdain, was her new blueprint. By 9:30, the SICU was a controlled chaos. Dr. Thorne, assigned to the most complex cases, moved with a quiet efficiency that belied the undercurrent of skepticism from the permanent staff. She meticulously reviewed charts, her fingers flying across keyboards, her eyes scanning waveforms and numbers with an almost preternatural speed. She noticed the subtle cyanosis on Mr. Henderson, a post-op cardiac patient, that the resident had attributed to a poor lighting condition. She felt the faint, irregular pulse of Ms. Chin, whose monitor showed a steady, if slightly elevated, heart rate. Her observations were often met with polite, yet firm, dismissals. "Just a bit of venous pooling," Dr. Thorne, a young resident, Dr. Miller, had said, waving away her concern about Mr. Henderson's skin tone. "The monitor's reading fine on Miss Chin. No need to overthink it." Thorne chose her battles carefully. She knew that direct confrontation, especially in this environment, would only solidify their preconceived notions. Instead, she documented her findings with meticulous detail, noting the precise time, her observations, and her recommended interventions. She was building a case, not just for her confidence, but for her patients' lives. At 11 o'clock, the first tremor of crisis struck. Mr. Henderson, the patient with the venous pooling, suddenly desaturated, his oxygen levels plummeting. Alarms blared, piercing the unit's carefully maintained calm. Residents scrambled, their movements less precise, more panicked. Dr. Miller, his face pale, fumbled with the oxygen mask. Dr. Thorne was already there, her hands moving with practiced speed, her voice calm amidst the rising panic. Airways compromised. Get a rapid sequence intubation kit, now. Dr. Miller, prepare the bronchoscope. Her commands were sharp, clear, and authoritative, cutting through the chaos like a scalpel. Albright, drawn by the alarms, rushed to the bedside, his initial disdain replaced by a flicker of concern. He watched as Thorne, without hesitation, took charge. Her dreadlocks, usually a point of contention, now seemed to frame a face of intense focus, her brow furrowed in concentration. She moved with an almost surgical grace, intubating Mr. Henderson with a swift, decisive motion that left no room for error. The bronchoscope revealed a severe tracheal stenosis, a complication missed in the earlier assessments. He would have coded within minutes, Thorne stated, her voice devoid of triumph, merely a factual observation. Albright, for the first time, looked at her with something akin to respect, a grudging acknowledgement of her skill. The crisis abated, but the tension lingered, a silent testament to Thorne's swift intervention. The afternoon brought a new wave of challenges. At 1400 hours, Ms. Chin, the patient whose fine monitor readings Thorne had questioned, suffered a sudden cardiac arrest. The unit plunged into another maelstrom of activity. This time, Thorne was not just an observer, she was the orchestrator. Her earlier documentation, dismissed by others, now became the blueprint for resuscitation. She has an undiagnosed Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, likely exacerbated by electrolyte imbalance, Thorne announced, her voice resonating with authority as she directed the resuscitation efforts. I noted the intermittent delta waves on her earlier ECGs, subtle but present. Push adenosine, then prepare for synchronized cardioversion, her diagnosis, delivered with precision and backed by her detailed notes, stunned the residents. Albright, witnessing Thorne's unwavering command and her encyclopedic knowledge, found himself following her lead without question. The unit, initially resistant, now moved in sync with her instructions, their earlier mockery forgotten in the face of life-or-death urgency. Thorne's hands, steady and confident, guided the paddle placement, her eyes fixed on the monitor. The jolt, the rhythmic beep, and then, a stable sinus rhythm. Miss Chin was stabilized. The silence that followed was thick with a newfound respect, a profound awe. Albright approached Thorne, his face etched with a mix of relief and something uncomfortably close to shame. Dr. Thorne, he began, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. Your diagnostic abilities are exceptional. We almost missed these, he gestured to the two patients, now stable, their lives hanging by a thread just moments before. Thorne merely nodded, her expression unreadable. She didn't need his praise. The patient's continued heartbeats were her only validation. It was 1830 when the true test arrived. A code red was declared, a mass casualty incident, a multi-vehicle pileup on the interstate. The psycho, already stretched thin, braced for impact. Ambulances screamed into the emergency bay, disgorging a steady stream of critically injured patients. The unit transformed into a war zone, a desperate dance between life and death. Albright, overwhelmed by the sheer volume and severity of injuries, found himself looking to Thorne, an unspoken plea for leadership in his eyes. Without a word, Thorne took charge, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the rising panic. Prioritize airway and hemorrhage control. Dr. Miller, you're with me on Trauma Bay 1. Dr. Albright, direct triage. We need more hands. Call every available surgeon, every resident, every nurse. Her dreadlocks, once a symbol of difference, now seemed to ripple with the intensity of her focus, a dark halo against the stark white of the hospital lights. She moved from patient to patient, her assessment swift and accurate, her hands a blur of motion as she clamped bleeders, inserted chest tubes, and stabilized fractures. She barked orders, her voice never wavering, her commands precise and actionable. The unit, under her unwavering guidance, began to function like a well-oiled machine, each member moving with a newfound purpose and efficiency. The residents, initially hesitant, now followed her every instruction with a fervent dedication, witnessing a master at work. At 2000 hours, amidst the controlled chaos, a new patient was wheeled in, a man in a military uniform, his face pale, his body riddled with shrapnel. His breathing was shallow, his pulse thready. Incoming. Major Thomas, active duty, multiple penetrating injuries, severe internal bleeding, a paramedic yelled. As Thorne moved to the gurney, her eyes met the Major's. A flicker of recognition, a shared understanding passed between them. It was then, as Thorne began her rapid assessment, that the Major, his voice weak but clear, spoke. Dr. Thorne? Is that? Dr. Thorne. Albright, busy with another patient, paused, his head turning towards the sound. The Major, his eyes fixed on Thorne, struggled to lift a hand. She saved my unit. Afghanistan, 2012. Mass casualty IED strike. She was embedded with us. The best damn trauma surgeon I ever saw, his voice, though strained, carried a conviction that silenced the frantic energy of the psycho. A hush fell over the unit, a sudden, profound silence in the midst of the storm. Albright, his face a mask of shock, stared at Thorne, then at the Major, then back at Thorne's dreadlocks, which now seemed to glow with an almost ethereal light. The residents, their earlier snickers a distant, shameful memory, looked at her with a mixture of awe and profound embarrassment. Thorne, her focus still on the Major's injuries, merely offered a small, knowing smile. Major Thomas, she said, her voice gentle, but firm. Good to see you again. We'll get you through this. Her hands, steady and sure, began the work of saving his life once more. The rest of the night was a blur of surgical interventions, transfusions, and critical care. By 2 o'clock, the worst of the crisis had passed. The psycho, though still busy, had a palpable sense of triumph. Patients were stabilized, lives were saved. Albright, exhausted but humbled, stood beside Thorne as she completed her last chart, the digital pen clicking softly. Dr. Thorne, he began, his voice thick with emotion. I owe you an apology. We all do. We judged you. Unfairly, Thorne looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. It's not about me, Dr. Albright. It's about the patients. Always she paused, then added, a hint of weariness in her tone, and it's about competence. Not assumptions, Albright nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her truth. He understood now. Her dreadlocks, her quiet demeanor, her temporary status, none of it mattered. What mattered was the hands that healed, the mind that diagnosed, the spirit that persevered. In the following days, Dr. Thorne's temporary assignment transformed into an indispensable presence. The residents, once dismissive, now sought her guidance, hanging on her every word, eager to learn from her vast experience. Dr. Miller, in particular, became her shadow, his admiration palpable. Albright, for his part, made a public apology during the next morning briefing, acknowledging his team's initial prejudice and praising Dr. Thorne's exceptional skills. He even went so far as to advocate for her permanent placement, a testament to her profound impact. The hospital administration, having witnessed the dramatic improvement in patient outcomes during her tenure, readily agreed. Dr. Eris Thorne, the black substitute doctor whose hair had been mocked, had not only saved lives but had also, in her quiet, uncompromising way, healed a broken system, proving that true expertise transcends superficial judgments and that sometimes The most profound lessons are learned in the crucible of crisis. Her dreadlocks, no longer a target, now seem to symbolize strength, resilience, and the unwavering power of competence.